two Better Part programs produced in 2005 started a journey of learning about the cruel world of dementia that has touched my life. Today's program is dedicated to all caregivers trying to do the best for their loved ones. This story spans the miles between California and the United Kingdom and covers the determination of a man to help future caregivers in his local area. I'm Val Jeffrey for The Better Part. Please stay tuned. As we age, we don't know whether we'll be affected by Alzheimer's. It's a scary word and a cruel disease which affects not just the patient, but the caregiver just as much. Pat and Mike Sullivan were married for 60 years. Pat, my good friend, died in 2015 at the age of 82. Mike cared for Pat at home. His wish is to give caregivers in his community and any community anywhere the tools to help them cope. My guest, Michael Sullivan, is a longtime friend, so this program is very close to my heart. Mike, thank you for doing this program with me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us about Pat.
Well, Pat and I married when I was in the Royal Air Force. She was 21, I was a couple of months short of that. She was very good looking, great sense of fun, had a brilliant smile, and she was a very calm person. It was very easy to start married life in the Air Force, even if we were separated at times. She had a good sense of humour. She loved people, liked to meet new people. She was calm, generous, very honest, and very loyal to her friends. As a result, we have lots of long-term friendships all over the world. Loved to dance. She had a great sense of rhythm. She didn't take it seriously. It was fun as far as she was concerned. And the dances she liked was Latin American and ballroom dancing. She liked to read. She was an avid reader of books. She liked to write short stories, mainly for her own benefit, normally with a humorous bent. She had a serious side, though, to her love of English. She liked to have exactly the right grammar in use. Her use of grammar was meticulous. And she liked to search out the many meanings of some words and the derivation of those words. Probably as a result of that, a keen interest of hers were very difficult cryptic crosswords. And she couldn't wait each weekend for the Financial Times to arrive so that she could do it as fast as possible. In short, Pat was a very interesting, very lovely lady.
When was Pat first diagnosed with Alzheimer's?
Not until 2012. Her situation had deteriorated quite suddenly at the end of 2011, and so we started going to the doctor who had previously treated her for very serious problems with anxiety and even depression at times. We couldn't understand it, and finally he decided to do blood tests, to send her for scans, and to take a cognitive test, and diagnosis was dementia, initially vascular dementia.
What year, retrospectively, did you establish Pat first shows signs of dementia?
Retrospectively, I started to think about when she might have had dementia at the beginning and what we could have done about it. What started me thinking about it was that there was a lot of publicity at the time she died of new medication that might delay the onset or the level of deterioration as a result of that disease. One of the points that was made was that the earlier you caught it, the better the chances of that happening. So I started to research some diaries that I'd been keeping to see if there had been any possible indications.
And what year did you see?
This was one of the diaries that I kept. And I decided that possibly the signs were there in 2005.
2005, and it was diagnosed in 2012.
Yeah, but it's only possible.
Right. To start with, how did you explain Pat's behaviour to yourself?
Well, we were both becoming a lot older. We were in our 70s. We couldn't pursue activities that we'd once pursued. I had retired several years earlier, and I'd taken up alternative interests to replace what had been a quite intense job. And one of the things that tends to happen then is that you get unduly preoccupied with those interests. And I did so, and to the detriment of my attention to Pat. So we both got a bit tense with each other, and that I thought anyway, had brought on a lot of the high level of anxiety she was suffering.
Did you know at that time how to recognise the warning signs of dementia?
I didn't even know what dementia was, so I had no thought about dementia.
Well, looking back, what was the first dementia warning sign that you now acknowledge?
It was basically a change of demeanour. She had once been a very calm, fun-loving person. Things that she could do easily suddenly became a problem to her. She'd get very irritated in the kitchen, which had never been before because she was a very, very good cook. She started to hesitate about going shopping. Didn't like to do some of the household chores and was very, just generally unhappy.
Was Pat aware that she had dementia?
No, not at that time. When it was diagnosed, we were told by the consultant that she had vascular dementia, that had been determined. And in many ways it was a relief at first because she could suddenly identify what some of the problems were.
What prompted you to take Pat to the doctor in 2012 specifically?
Well, there was a sudden deterioration in her demeanour, and it was really quite dramatic. We were staying in Paris for Christmas with friends in Versailles, and all of a sudden she wouldn't get out of bed. She was very unhappy. There was nothing physically wrong with her that was apparent, but she just would not get out of bed and see them. And this happened 2 or 3 days in a row. She would get out of bed finally about 5 o'clock in the evening, and then she said she just wanted to go home early. And that really started me to think about what on earth was causing this.
You mentioned anxiety. Why do you think it took so long to diagnose Alzheimer's?
Well, because again, she was being treated for anxiety. There was medication, and I addressed some of the problems of neglecting her. I changed I didn't concentrate so much on some of my interests. We got together again, and 2 years after the first sign of it, there was quite a significant improvement. So we thought maybe that was what the problem had been.
So the medication kind of disguised the Alzheimer's?
I think it was a mixture of the two from our point of view. We thought maybe the medication was working for the anxiety, because that's all we thought about at the time. And the level of activity between the two of us had improved quite a lot.
What were some of the situations that made Pat anxious?
She started to get, she used to be very meticulous in doing household accounts. She liked to keep the house spotless. She loved cooking, and she was very keen. She liked to eat well and drink well as well. But all of these things suddenly became a chore to her, and that was one of the first signs that there might be a problem there. She became bored with where she was. She became somewhat bored with her life, wanted change, but didn't know what change she wanted.
So you're mentioning your daily diaries. Did you fill them in specifically to track Pat, or had you been doing it for a while?
Well, I'd been involved in contract negotiations with unions, some of which lasted 18 months or more. And so back in the late 70s, I started to keep a diary because one never knew who would say what to when and how that was interpreted. So I started to keep notes and then just kept it going from there. And I've done it every day. Most of it is mundane, but every so often there's something of interest and ultimately something of value.
But it served a good purpose. You were able to refer back after the fact to look into that time between 2005 and 2012, and we wouldn't know now if you hadn't have kept those diaries. You have one right there. Which is the one that you have?
This is
'Cause you have many.
2012. This is 2012.
And what does it say in 2012?
It indicates first of all, the deterioration that developed. It indicates the examinations that Pat took, which were blood tests, scans, cognitive tests, and finally it indicates when the determination was made that she had vascular dementia, and ultimately it became mixed dementia with Alzheimer's.
Mm. When did the decline first become noticeable?
The ultimate decline, I presume you mean. That would be in 2011, Christmas 2011.
Right. And why did you notice it then? What was happening that you noticed it?
There was the staying in bed, the wanting to go home early from Christmas. She then developed a urine deterioration. There was a problem of infection with urine, and that can have quite a dramatic effect with anybody that has dementia, as I ultimately found out. We didn't know what was causing this, and it took another 2 years to find out what that possible cause was. Mm. But it was all a much more volatile relationship.
In 2005, the Better Part did 2 programs on Alzheimer's. Is it Alzheimer's and Diagnosis Alzheimer's? You had the opportunity to look at those, right? Did any of those signs jump out at you that time?
No. When we looked at it first, to me it was just an academic exercise. It was something we were interested in, what you were doing in the Better Part. It never occurred to us even to think about dementia, because when we first saw it, it was a period when Pat had suddenly started to improve quite a lot. Mm. So there was no thought of dementia at that stage.
So you were supporting me by watching the program?
In a sense, yes.
And I thought you were looking at them because you would see something for Pat. Mm. It's ironic, really, isn't it?
It is, it's very ironic.
And then later, the next program that we did, which was Alzheimer's Talk to Me, I actually did that for Pat so that I could learn how to speak to her. And you had the chance to watch that as well?
Yeah, that's become particularly useful now, because after this first leaflet, we want to do a leaflet to explain how carers should react. We want to do it from the point of view of the impact on the patient themselves. And there is much in the psychologist's program that you did that we can use. I mean, things have moved on from then, but there's a lot that's still extremely valid.
I'm glad it's going to be of use. I'm very happy it's going to be of use. On a good note, a good time was had in October 2012 after she was diagnosed, and it was Pat's 80th birthday. So tell us about the event and how did she cope with it?
Well, Pat could always raise herself for special events, no matter how she was feeling. And what we did was we took over a small hotel in Boulogne, or near Boulogne in northern France, and we invited about 30 guests from Australia, from France, from England, relatives as well, of course, and from the United States. We had 3 nights at the hotel. We had some superb dinners there, lots of wine flowing, lots of singing, and Pat just enjoyed it. We had dancing. It was a very great period, and it's something that lives in my memory. Now we had a marvellous record, DVD of the record showing Pat singing at the time. It was a great time, and she certainly loved it. When she first saw the DVD, she was crying, and it was a great experience. It also provided the lead up to a second celebration.
What about the travel getting there? Because it's quite a distance.
Well, as you may remember, we weren't too sure. At first we thought it'd be quite easy to catch a ferry from Dover to Boulogne. That was cancelled, and we then had to go to Calais. And some of our guests, as I recollect, had to walk all the way from the station because there were no taxis available.
Oh, I think I know those people. How did she react on the journey? Did she handle it well?
She did. What we started to do, a very close friend of hers, Lorna, Pat would get very distracted in any long car journey. And so Lorna used to come with us, and she would come on holiday with us. If there was going to be a long train journey involved, she could distract Pat, keep us talking. And Lorna was a great friend. I mean, she'd been a friend for many years, and she was really helpful when Pat had dementia.
The decline became more apparent in 2013. For example, she started to need help dressing.
Yeah. It was, she needed help dressing, she needed help in the bathroom, she needed help to get out of bed. And that's an area that I would like to see addressed in any future training that's given to people. Because I was on my own for a lot of the time, and I never really, I could get her out of bed and get her walking, but there was always the worry that I hadn't been really taught how to do it properly. So in retrospect, she was probably quite uncomfortable when I did some of these things.
And you were frightened of hurting her.
Exactly. And there's always the fear of a fall, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Did she repeat herself at that time?
Yes, that was another problem. Pat loved talking to people, but she lost conversation. Obviously, it was a memory problem. And she would read, she kept a diary of proposed events, so she knew what was coming up. In the end, when she couldn't follow a conversation, she would just start reading from that, which was quite distracting for people she was talking to. She also repeated it, and I think this is an area that needs attention, because I put that down just for memory loss. In fact, it was probably frustration as well. She didn't know if I'd understood. And so there's another areas we want to cover in the next pamphlet.
And this was about the time that she stopped doing crosswords, was it?
Yes, it was. I think she easily became distressed if she couldn't think of something. So whereas before she would just keep thinking until the answer came, it distressed her when she couldn't do it. So gradually she stopped doing those crosswords.
Music helped.
Music was a terrific thing. When she was first diagnosed, one of the dementia nurses suggested that we go to Singing for Pleasure. It was a local event run at the local church and by the local Alzheimer's Society. And the lead person there was Julia, who was a professional jazz singer. Pat loved jazz, she liked to sing. So when she first started, she and Julia would jam it up and thoroughly enjoy themselves. But they also played old songs that required action, so that it made the people's brains work. When we started in 2012, there were maybe 13 or 14 attendees. By this year, there are about 50 or 60, so it's been very successful. I would like to see it, if possible, introduced to hospitals, because I think it would be very effective.
That's a wonderful idea. Is that something you will recommend?
Yes. Part of the project that I've become involved in is I've become a patient's representative on one of the boards of my local hospital. And so I've suggested that some of the changes that should be made, they're very, not all of them are accepted. I've got them to change the way they try to feed people in hospital, because often if somebody's got dementia and they're not sure what's happening, just say no. And the nurses will often then take the food away, and they can lose weight. Now they've changed the type of way they're feeding them so that there's an all-day food available.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And they're listening to the input, which is important too.
Yeah.
Now, Pat had a special friend, Lorna. How did Lorna help Pat? What kind of things did she do for her?
In so many ways. We'd known Lorna since the late 60s. She was an ex-airline flight attendant, so she was very good at dealing with people. She and Pat became very close friends. So apart from helping her on long car journeys, she would go shopping for her. She would buy clothes with her. She would take her to the hairdresser, have her nails done, etc. And she made life a lot more interesting for Pat.
Yeah, and also when you realised you needed help with daily chores, Sarah came into your life.
Sarah saved my life, I think. I wasn't very good at daily chores when I started. So she started to come 3 days a week. And she not only helped me in those chores, but she too became a friend of Pat. so Pat had company more frequently.
Did you find a support group for yourself, and did it help?
At first I couldn't understand what all the fuss was about for the carer, because in 2012, when she was first diagnosed, it didn't seem too much of a problem. But as it developed, I soon did realise I needed help. I had help from local neighbours. In the end, I got a professional group to come in. In those days when nobody else was scheduled, they would come in for 2 hours a day. And so every day there was either company for Pat or help for me.
The last special time with Pat was April 2015. Your diamond wedding anniversary, 60 years, is a long time.
It is a long time, and I was very worried about Pat's state at the time. She had been in hospital 3 months before, dealing with dehydration. And we learnt a lot from that, because she had had things like sore eyes, which irritated her, and any kind of irritation can help the dementia deteriorate. We learned that might have been associated with the sore eyes, might have been associated with the dehydration. The urine infections that she had become fairly constant were certainly involved with the dehydration. And that kind of resolved it, having been into hospital. We then had what was provided by social services, is what they call short-term care. And so they sent 2 people along 4 times a day just to help with that for 6 weeks. It enabled me to work out what sort of help I would need subsequently. It was a very valuable service. The people were marvellous. I learned a lot from them. And I think it's something one can only commend the service that's provided to people in that sense.
When Pat passed away 3 months later, what were the thoughts that went through your mind?
Obviously, when you've had 60 years of a very close relationship, very loving relationship, grief is the first thing that hits you, and it's very difficult to overcome that. With grief comes the tendency to have recriminations, to think, could I have done things better? And in some ways, I think I could have done things much better. I just didn't know enough at the time. Because when this happens, you become occupied with the functions that are going on. You don't have time to really study what's really happening. I think, and again in the new pamphlet, we want to deal with the frustration, the anxiety, the sadness that people that are affected by it might feel. And I think if I'd known more, thought more about it, I would have been more sympathetic in some situations.
At what point did you become determined to highlight the problems in the system and try to assist other caregivers?
Well, as I researched the diary to find out when Pat might first have been diagnosed, had we known more, it also, going through the diary, showed some of the shortcomings in the treatment, both I'd given her and the helpers had given her. So I started to, when Pat had died, I was very impressed at the funeral service by the local priest. So I just joined the church and started to work with her on a pamphlet, and we both agreed it would be good to go out to the local people to teach them more. But the problem was you get so many publicity leaflets through the letterbox. We were concerned that we just did a narrative, it would be simply thrown away. So we decided to do a pictorial presentation, as you can see on your leaflet, which would show a typical conversation that people might have in the lead up to this.
Right.
And there is a tendency also for people to think if I ignore it, it'll go away. And that we had to address. And so the idea was to get them persuaded that they would go to the doctor to get checked out, and either they would find what the problem was, or they might receive reassurance that there wasn't a known problem.
Right.
And that's the basic idea of this leaflet.
Right. So the people that helped you with it was a local church?
Local church, local residents association. I took the idea to several surgeries. The surgeries are now holding this. It's gone to churches for distribution. We've dropped about 1,000 or more through letterboxes, and we've got about another 1,000 deliver when I get home.
Yeah, all that folding when you get home.
Yes.
Initial recognition period was tough. Did you feel guilt about that time period?
Yes, I did. As I say, I think if I'd known more, I'd have expected the physical deterioration that ultimately developed. I mean, I hadn't appreciated, although there is information available if you look far enough, that says that they might well have difficulty swallowing, mm-hmm. and that is a real problem. Mm-hmm. It took me a long time to come to terms with that. I thought it was just anxiety about swallowing at first, I think that you just simply don't know how to handle that even now. Even with what I know, I wouldn't know how quite to get them to drink properly. What
information or advice would you like to give to caregivers in a nutshell?
Don't ignore any symptoms you see. Get the thing checked out as quickly as possible, and try to understand, if it's found that there is a problem, try to understand exactly how the patient feels.
Yeah. Mike, you've done a wonderful job. You always had a positive attitude and kept Pat going. You loved her with all your heart, and the pamphlets that you're doing and what you're doing with the hospital and everything are going to touch people's lives. So I just want to thank you on behalf of the Better Part for sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me, and I must say, instead of just remaining local, we've gone global with this.
We're going global. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Phil.
Wherever you live, whether you're a caregiver or know someone who is, we hope you found this program useful. Please open your heart and find out how you can help the caregivers in your community. Thank you for watching. Join us again.